cold open. The house grows quiet. Tonight, we are not going to a castle. We are not following a king to a carved bed hung with silk, or a knight to a chamber lit by a dozen candles. We are going somewhere smaller, dimmer, and far more common. We are going to an ordinary room in medieval Europe, after the day has finally loosened its grip. The fire has sunk low. The last pot has been moved from the hearth. A stool has been pushed back against the wall. Outside, the lane is almost dark, except for a weak glimmer from a doorway, and the pale shape of a path worn by many feet. Somewhere nearby, an animal shifts in its stall. Somewhere farther off, a dog gives one uncertain bark, then remembers that the night is not really its business. Inside, people are preparing for sleep. Not the private, silent sleep that many of us imagine today, with a separate room, a soft mattress, a door that closes, and a little pool of personal darkness. Medieval sleep was often shared. It was practical. It was seasonal. It belonged to the household more than to the individual. A child curls near a sibling. A servant makes a place on a bench, or on straw, or near the warm stones of the hearth. A married couple settles onto a mattress stuffed with straw, wool, feathers if they are fortunate, or something simpler if they are not. In a town, a traveler may lie beside people whose names he learned only an hour ago. In a village, the night belongs to the cottage, the animals, the weather, and the small domestic noises that no one thinks to call noise because they are simply life. The room does not become silent. It only becomes slower. A coal shifts. Cloth rustles. Someone coughs softly. Someone whispers a final word that does not need an answer. The smell of smoke is in the rafters. The smell of wool is in the blankets. The smell of damp earth comes through the wall when the weather has been wet. And then, very gradually, the household enters the old human arrangement with darkness. This is a story about how ordinary people slept in medieval Europe. It is a story of straw mattresses and wooden beds, shared rooms and night prayers, winter cold and summer insects, late work and early bells. It is about bodies trying to rest in houses that were never completely separate from smoke, animals, weather, neighbors, and worry. It is also, quietly, a story about how familiar the past can feel. Because although the room is different, and the bed may be rougher, and the night far darker than our own, the desire is the same. To be warm enough. To be safe enough. To let the day go. So settle in. Let the candle burn lower. Let the lane outside become less distinct. Tonight, we are going to sleep, as ordinary people might have done, in medieval Europe. Chapter 1. What counted as a bed? To understand medieval sleep, we should begin with the bed, though the word itself can be a little misleading. When we hear bed, we may picture a single object, frame, mattress, sheets, pillow, perhaps a blanket folded at the foot. But for many ordinary medieval people, a bed was not always a fixed piece of furniture in a private bedroom. It could be a place arranged each evening. It could be a sack of straw. It could be a low wooden frame. It could be a bench, a chest, a corner by the hearth, a loft, or a shared mattress laid where space allowed. The poorest did not necessarily own what we would call a proper bedstead. A household might have straw spread on the floor, or a simple pallet that could be moved aside during the day. Straw was common because it was available, replaceable, and useful, though not especially luxurious. It could be stuffed into a ticking, a kind of mattress cover, or laid in bundles and covered with cloth. In some places, rushes or other plant materials were used on floors. These could make a room feel softer underfoot, but they also carried the ordinary problems of organic things, dust, damp, insects, and the need for regular changing. For people with a little more means, a mattress might be filled with straw, chaff, wool, or feathers. Feather beds were desirable and warmer, but they were not evenly available to everyone. Wool offered softness and insulation. Straw offered practicality. A bed might be topped with coarse linen sheets if the household owned them, and with blankets, cloaks, or coverlets depending on the season. The bed frame, when there was one, mattered. Being raised off the floor helped separate the sleeper from drafts, damp, dirt, and small creatures that moved where humans also lived. A wooden bedstead could be a sign of household stability. It did not need to be grand to be valuable. Even a plain frame said that the family possessed furniture that was not merely temporary. In some towns and colder regions, people used enclosed or partly enclosed beds, sometimes later known as box beds, or beds set into wall recesses or surrounded by curtains. Curtains were not only decoration. They kept warmth close to the sleeper and offered a little privacy in a room where privacy was scarce. For wealthier households, bed hangings could display status. For ordinary households, any hanging cloth might help with cold air and with the feeling of being slightly apart from the room. But most ordinary sleep was not about display. It was about solving practical problems. Where can a body lie down? How can warmth be kept? How can bedding be kept dry? How can a family fit itself into one room? How can a person sleep after labor, with another day waiting? The answers changed by region, century, season, and household wealth. Medieval Europe was not one room, one bed, one habit. A peasant cottage in northern France, an artisan household in Florence, a farmstead in England, a room above a shop in a German town, and a traveler's lodging in a roadside inn could all offer different arrangements. Still, certain patterns are useful. Sleep was often more communal than modern sleep. Beds were valuable objects or valuable spaces. People shared them. Children slept with children. Servants slept where there was room. A guest might be placed with another guest. In inns, strangers could share beds without the arrangement seeming automatically extraordinary, though it could certainly be uncomfortable, risky, or socially awkward. A medieval bed was also a place of more than sleeping. In wealthier homes, beds could be sites of birth, illness, death, conversation, business, and ceremony. In ordinary homes, the bed was simpler, but still important. It was the place where the tired body met the limits of the household. Imagine a mattress filled with straw. It does not receive the body in a silent, modern way. It sighs and crackles. It holds the smell of the field, the room, the smoke, the people who have used it. If it is fresh, it may seem clean and almost sweet. If it has been too long unchanged, it may be dusty and less kind. A blanket goes over it. Someone tucks a cloak beneath a shoulder. A child's foot pushes against a sibling's leg. The mattress shifts and then settles. This was not romantic comfort. It was not always miserable either. It was ordinary. And ordinary, in history, is often the hardest thing to see clearly, because people rarely write detailed accounts of what everyone thinks they already know. Inventories may list beds, sheets, bolsters, coverlets, and blankets. Moral writers may complain about sleeping habits. Medical writers may give advice. Court records may mention who was found where. Literature may exaggerate, joke, or moralize. Archaeology may reveal houses, hearths, floors, and furniture traces. From all of this, we build a careful picture, but never a perfectly complete one. So our room tonight should remain gently flexible. There is a bed, perhaps plain and wooden. There is bedding, not abundant but enough. There is straw, or wool, or feathers if the household is fortunate. There are blankets, and maybe a linen sheet. There is a bolster or pillow, though not always one per person. There are bodies sharing warmth because warmth is not wasted. And there is the first truth of ordinary medieval sleep. A bed was not only a comfort. It was a household resource. Chapter 2. The room where everyone slept. The modern bedroom is a surprisingly private idea. In many medieval households, especially among ordinary people, sleeping did not happen in a separate room reserved for one person. It happened wherever the household could make space. Often that meant the main room, near the hearth, under the same roof as work, storage, cooking, children, tools, and sometimes animals. In a small rural home, the hearth was the center. It gave heat, light, and the means to cook. It also gave smoke, ash, and danger. The fire might be banked at night, covered or reduced so embers could be coaxed alive in the morning. The household wanted warmth, but did not want flame. Everyone understood, in a practical way, that sleep and fire had to be managed together. The room might have a packed earth floor, or wooden boards, or stone, depending on place and means. The roof might be thatch, tile, wood, or another local material. Walls might be timber, wattle and daub, stone, clay, or a mix. The house breathed differently from a modern building. Wind could find cracks. Smoke could linger. Damp could rise. Heat could vanish quickly once the fire faded. So people slept close to useful warmth. This did not mean sleeping directly in comfort beside a cheerful blaze. An open fire could smoke, spit, and threaten. But the hearth area, the warmed wall, the stones that had absorbed heat, and the general center of the room offered a better chance than a cold outer edge. In winter, position mattered. In summer, air mattered. A place that was desirable in January might be too close and stale in July. There was also the question of who belonged where. Households were not always just parents and children. They could include grandparents, apprentices, hired workers, servants, lodgers, cousins, and guests. In town houses, the workshop and household often overlapped. An apprentice might sleep in or near the shop, guarding goods as much as resting. A servant might have a pallet in a passage, loft, kitchen, or corner. Children might share a bed not only because of affection, but because space and bedding were limited. Privacy, when it existed, was often made with cloth, distance, routine, or social understanding rather than with thick walls and individual rooms. A curtain could create a sleeping space. A bed set back in an alcove could give some separation. A loft above the main room could remove a sleeper from immediate movement below. But sounds traveled. Smells traveled. People knew each other's breathing, coughing, turning, rising, and returning. There is a softness in this, and also a lack of escape. Imagine the room late at night. The day's work has left traces everywhere. A tool rests where someone set it down. A basket is near the wall. Wool, grain, leather, wood, or cloth may be stored inside because these things are wealth and cannot simply be left outside. If animals are under the same roof, or close enough to be heard through a partition, their presence becomes part of the night. A cow shifts. A pig roots. Chickens settle. A horse stamps. In some houses, animals and humans shared a building for warmth, protection, and convenience, though arrangements varied widely. The household does not expect perfect quiet. It expects known sounds. Known sounds are important. They mean the roof is still there, the animals are still where they should be, the fire has not flared, the baby is breathing, the door has not opened. The ordinary noises of a sleeping household can be reassuring precisely because they are repeated. In towns, the sleeping room might be above a shop or behind it. The street outside could be narrow, muddy, paved, busy even late, or almost still depending on the city and the hour. Neighbors were close. Walls could be thin. Someone's late return might be everyone's knowledge. A cart might pass. A watchman might call. Church bells might mark time. In some cities, rules about curfew, fire, taverns, and night movement shaped the rhythm of darkness. And yet people slept. They slept not because conditions were ideal, but because exhaustion is persuasive. A day of field labor, washing, hauling, brewing, tending animals, grinding, stitching, carrying water, selling goods, standing in a shop, or serving in another household could press the body down into rest. Medieval people were not immune to discomfort. They complained of cold, bad beds, fleas, noise, worry, and sickness. But ordinary life teaches the body what it must accept. At night, the room became a map of the household. The most established people might take the main bed. Younger children might be nearby. Older children, servants, or apprentices might occupy lesser beds, pallets, benches, lofts, or straw. A guest might disrupt the arrangement. Illness might change everything. A new baby might pull sleep into fragments. Winter might draw everyone closer. Summer might push people apart. No one had to explain the system each night. They knew it because they lived it. This is one of the quiet differences between past and present. A medieval sleeper was often less alone with the night. That did not always mean comfort. Shared sleep could mean warmth, protection, and companionship. It could also mean crowding, surveillance, lack of privacy, and the irritation of another person's restless body. It could mean a child safe beside an older sibling. It could mean a servant never fully off duty. It could mean a traveler uneasy beside a stranger. It could mean a marriage bed in a room where others were only a curtain away. So when we imagine ordinary medieval sleep, we should not imagine every person retiring politely to an individual chamber. We should imagine a household settling. One by one, tasks end. The door is secured. The fire is made safe. Bedding is pulled into place. Bodies find their assigned or habitual corners. Someone says a prayer. Someone grumbles. Someone is already asleep before the others finish arranging themselves. The room becomes dark, but it remains full. Full of breath. Full of stored things. Full of family structure. Full of labor waiting for morning. And in that crowded darkness, sleep begins. Chapter 3. Darkness, light, and the shape of the night. Medieval night was darker than most nights we know. Not everywhere, and not always. Moonlight could be bright. Snow could reflect what little light existed. A town with lamps, open doors, religious houses, or late work could have small islands of brightness. But compared with electric light, medieval darkness was deep, local, and meaningful. Light required fuel. A candle cost something. An oil lamp cost something. A rushlight, made by dipping the pith of a rush in fat or grease, could be cheaper and common in some regions, but it still belonged to the economy of the household. Light was not simply switched on and forgotten. It was made, tended, used, and conserved. This changed sleep. When daylight faded, certain kinds of work became harder. Fine sewing, reading, writing, sorting, or careful repair required light. Rougher tasks might continue by firelight. Conversations could continue in darkness. But the night encouraged a narrowing of activity. The household moved toward the hearth, toward flame, toward the small circle where faces were visible. The last light of the evening had a ceremony of its own, even when no one called it that. A wick is trimmed. A candle is pinched or snuffed. A lamp is moved away from cloth. A rushlight gutters. A coal glows red under ash. People know the shapes of the room well enough to move without seeing everything clearly. The chest is there. The stool is there. The door beam is there. The child is there, hopefully not directly where a foot will land. In darkness, time also felt different. Mechanical clocks became more common in later medieval towns, and church bells structured days and nights in many places, but ordinary people did not live by glowing numbers beside the bed. Time might be known by bells, by the position of stars or moon, by the fire, by habit, by the cockcrow, by the body, by the needs of animals, by the call to prayer in monastic settings, or by the simple knowledge that dawn had not yet come. Scholars have discussed the possibility that many pre-modern Europeans slept in two main intervals, often called first sleep and second sleep, with a waking period in the middle of the night. Evidence is strongest in later sources, and it is risky to flatten all medieval Europe into one universal pattern. Still, it is reasonable to say that sleep could be more segmented than the modern ideal of one uninterrupted block. People woke. They woke because the fire needed attention, because a child cried, because an animal moved, because cold entered the bedding, because someone had to urinate, because bells rang, because worry surfaced, because the body had rested enough for a while, or because the night itself invited a quiet pause. What happened in that pause varied. A person might pray. Prayer before sleep and upon waking was part of Christian life in medieval Europe, though practice differed by person and place. A person might whisper with a bedmate. A couple might be intimate. Someone might check the hearth. Someone might tend a baby. Someone might lie awake and think about debts, weather, illness, labor, or the temper of a master. The important thing is that waking at night was not necessarily treated as a failure of sleep in the modern medical sense. It could be part of the rhythm of darkness. Imagine first sleep. The household settles, heavy with the day. The first descent into sleep may be quick. Bodies are tired, feet sore, hands rough, shoulders used. The room darkens, and for a while there is only breathing. Then, later, someone wakes. The fire is a dull red eye. The room is cold at the edges. A faint line of moonlight touches the floor if there is a gap in the shutter. The person does not panic at being awake. They listen. The house is still. The animals are still enough. The wind is there, but not dangerous. The sleeper turns, adjusts the blanket, perhaps murmurs a prayer, and after a time, slips into sleep again. This kind of night is not empty. It has chambers. First sleep. A small waking. Second sleep. Dawn. We should hold the idea gently, not as a law, but as a possibility that reminds us that sleep is historical. The way a society lights its houses, organizes labor, marks time, and understands the body changes the experience of rest. In medieval Europe, darkness was not merely the absence of light. It was a condition that shaped households, fears, prayers, work, warmth, and sleep. Chapter 4. Cold, warmth, and the winter bed. If there is one thing a medieval sleeper could not ignore, it is temperature. The past was not always colder than the present, but houses were often less sealed, less evenly heated, and more dependent on local fuel, building materials, and weather. Warmth had to be made, protected, and shared. Winter sleep was an achievement. The day might have been spent gathering wood, tending animals, working in damp fields, carrying water that numbed the hands, or standing in a shop where the door opened again and again. By evening, the body wanted heat not as luxury, but as repair. The hearth helped. So did clothing. People did not necessarily undress fully for bed in the way many modern people might. Night clothing varied, and many ordinary sleepers likely wore shifts, shirts, caps, or some of the garments that helped keep warmth close. A linen or woolen cap could make a real difference. Feet might be tucked beneath fabric or against another body. Cloaks and outer garments could become extra bedding. The bed itself was a strategy against cold. Straw trapped air. Wool held warmth. Feathers, where available, were prized because they made a bed soft and insulating. Blankets could be layered. Curtains around a bed, even plain ones, reduced drafts. Sharing a bed was also practical. The human body is a small stove, and medieval households wasted little. We should not make this too cozy. Cold could be miserable. Damp bedding could be miserable. Smoke could irritate the lungs and eyes. A poorly thatched roof could leak. A child could kick off covers. An elderly person could feel the cold more deeply. Illness made everything worse. If fuel was scarce, the night could become something to endure. But there is still a kind of domestic intelligence in the winter room. The family knows which wall is coldest. They know where wind enters. They know which blanket is best. They know which child cannot be trusted to stay covered. They know whether the fire has been banked well. They know the sound of weather changing before dawn. Outside, the village or town is reduced to shapes. Rooflines. Frost. Mud hardened under a cold sky. In rural places, fields are not empty so much as hidden. In towns, lanes may be slick, and doorways hold the smell of straw, smoke, and damp wool. The church tower may stand as a darker shape against a dark sky. Inside, the sleeper turns toward warmth. The first moments in bed may not be warm. Sheets, if there are sheets, feel cold. Straw compresses slowly. A blanket must be arranged. Someone's elbow is in the wrong place. A child complains. The bed creaks. Then the small climate under the covers begins to change. Breath warms the nearby cloth. The cold at the toes retreats a little. The sleeper becomes less separate from the bedding. In wealthier households, warming pans could be used later in history, filled with embers and passed between sheets, though one had to be careful. Among ordinary medieval people, simpler strategies mattered more: heated stones in some contexts, extra clothes, shared bedding, sleeping near the hearth, keeping drafts out, and using whatever textiles the household possessed. Textiles were valuable. A blanket was not just a blanket. It represented wool, labor, trade, care, and cost. Sheets could appear in household inventories because they mattered. Bedding could be inherited, pawned, stolen, washed, mended, and prized. To have enough bedding for winter was a form of security. This security was uneven. The poor might sleep in conditions that left little buffer between body and cold. Laborers, servants, travelers, and the displaced might take what rest they could in barns, outbuildings, kitchens, common rooms, or crowded lodgings. Monastic and charitable institutions sometimes provided beds or shelter, but the experience varied greatly. A bad night could be dangerously cold, especially for the old, sick, or very young. Still, ordinary people built routines around survival. Before bed, the door is checked. A shutter is fitted. The fire is made safe but not entirely lost. Bedding is shaken or spread. A cap is pulled down. A child is moved closer. Someone mutters about the weather. Someone else, already half asleep, does not answer. Then comes the deep winter quiet. Not silence. Never silence. But the muffled quiet of a house holding itself against cold. The wind moves outside. The roof answers. An animal breathes. The embers settle. A sleeper wakes, pulls the blanket higher, and drifts again. In that moment, the bed is not a symbol. It is shelter within shelter. A little room of cloth, straw, warmth, and shared breath inside the larger room, inside the house, inside the winter night. Chapter 5. Summer sleep, insects, and open air. Summer changed everything. The same room that struggled to keep warmth in during winter could become close, smoky, and restless when the weather turned warm. Bedding that felt precious in January might feel heavy in July. The hearth still mattered for cooking, but its heat was no longer welcome in the same way. Air became the thing the body wanted. In summer, sleep could spread. People might leave doors open longer while light remained. Work could continue later because the days were longer. The household might delay sleep until the room cooled. In some places and circumstances, people might sleep in lofts, barns, outbuildings, or even outdoors during harvest or travel, though safety, custom, animals, weather, and social rules all shaped what was possible. The medieval night in summer had a different sound. Insects. Animals. Voices lingering outside. Work connected to haymaking or harvest. The late return of people from fields. The movement of carts. The soft noise of a village not fully asleep because warmth has loosened the boundary between house and lane. Inside, the bed may be less about trapping warmth and more about finding a bearable arrangement. Blankets are pushed down. A linen sheet may be enough if the household has one. A sleeper turns to find a cooler patch. Children sprawl. Someone complains of fleas. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, and other pests were real parts of pre-modern life. Not every bed was always crawling, and we should avoid turning the past into a cartoon of filth, but insects and parasites were common enough to shape habits and complaints. Bedding needed airing, shaking, washing when possible, and changing. Straw needed replacement. Herbs and scents might be used in some households, partly for pleasantness, partly from beliefs about health and pests, though their effectiveness varied. A medieval sleeper might know the tiny irritation of bites in the dark. The scratch at the ankle. The shifting of a blanket. The quiet frustration of being tired but not left alone by the bed itself. In a shared bed, one person's restlessness becomes everyone's. A child scratches. An adult murmurs for them to be still. The straw crackles. The room returns to its slow breathing. Summer also brought light earlier and later. Dawn could arrive with work already waiting. Animals needed tending. Fields demanded attention. Heat encouraged early rising for certain tasks. In towns, trades began as soon as light allowed. The body's sleep was tied to the sun more closely than ours often is, though not perfectly. People stayed up for festivals, markets, emergencies, religious observances, and social life. But ordinary labor leaned toward daylight. The summer bed might be less enclosed. Curtains that helped in winter could feel too warm. A shutter might be opened for air, though that invited insects, noise, and sometimes worry. In crowded towns, open windows also meant hearing neighbors. Privacy thinned with the heat. Imagine a hot night above a workshop. The day's work has warmed the building. The street below still holds heat from the afternoon. A smell of leather, dye, bread, wool, fish, or wood smoke lingers depending on the trade nearby. The family lies in thin garments. Someone has pushed aside the heavier blanket. A child asks for water. The air does not move much. A fly worries the room until someone swats half-heartedly and misses. Now imagine a rural summer night. The door has been open late. The sky holds stars. The fields are not quiet, they are alive with small sounds. The animals settle. The household is tired in a different way, sun-tired, muscle-tired, perhaps hay-dust-tired. A person may fall asleep quickly despite heat, because the body has been used hard. Summer sleep could also be interrupted by labor rhythms. Harvest seasons demanded long days. Work might begin early, pause in heat, resume later, and leave little room for delicate sleep habits. The bed received people who had not spent the day sitting still. There is a temptation to imagine medieval nights as uniformly frightening. But summer nights could also be sociable, open, and textured. People sat outside. They told stories. They worked by lingering light. They heard neighbors. They watched the sky. They knew the paths by smell and shape as much as sight. Then, when they slept, the boundary between inside and outside remained thin. A breeze through a shutter. A moth near a flame. A rooster confused too early. A baby stirring. A dog turning in dust. The first gray of dawn appearing before anyone feels fully ready. Summer did not make medieval sleep easy. It made it different. Less wrapped. More exposed. Less silent. More alive around the edges. And in that warmer darkness, the ordinary sleeper negotiated with air, insects, neighbors, and the long reach of daylight. Chapter 6. Prayer, Fear, and Protection Before Sleep. Before sleep, many medieval Europeans prayed. This was not only private comfort, though it could be that. It was part of a world in which night carried spiritual meaning. Darkness was not simply inconvenient. It was associated with vulnerability, temptation, illness, death, spirits, thieves, fire, and the unknown. Christian prayers, blessings, signs of the cross, saints, candles, and familiar words helped place the sleeper inside a protected order. The ordinary person's bedtime prayer might be simple. A Pater Noster. An Ave Maria in later medieval practice. A request for protection through the night. A sign of the cross. A remembered formula taught by a parent, priest, or household elder. Not everyone prayed with equal devotion. Not everyone understood Latin prayers in the same way. But the habit of placing the night under God's care was widespread. Sleep itself was sometimes compared to death. The body lay still. The mind wandered. Dreams came without permission. A person surrendered watchfulness. To sleep was to become helpless for a while, and in a world with limited medicine, real darkness, open flames, and uncertain security, helplessness mattered. So the household made protections. The door was barred. The hearth was checked. Tools were brought in. Animals were secured. A candle might be extinguished carefully. A child might be blessed. A charm, prayer, relic, holy image, or remembered saint might comfort someone against fear. Practices varied, and official church teaching did not always approve of folk remedies or charms, but ordinary religion often mixed formal devotion with local habits of protection. Dreams mattered too. Medieval people inherited many ways of thinking about dreams: biblical dreams, medical theories, moral warnings, demonic temptations, natural images from daily life, and simple nonsense of the sleeping mind. A dream could be dismissed, feared, interpreted, or remembered. For an ordinary sleeper, a troubling dream might lead to a prayer on waking. A comforting dream might be told quietly in the morning. Night fears were not all supernatural. Fire was a practical fear. Theft was practical. Illness was practical. A crying child was practical. A storm could damage a roof. A river could rise. A late traveler could knock at a door. A town curfew could make movement suspicious. In some places, watchmen moved through streets. In villages, dogs, neighbors, and habit formed part of security. But fear did not fill every night. Most nights were uneventful, and uneventful nights are the foundation of ordinary life. People did not go to bed every evening in a state of terror. They went to bed tired. They performed the protections they knew. They accepted darkness because everyone did. Imagine a mother touching two fingers to her child's forehead in blessing. Imagine an older man murmuring a prayer he has said for decades, the words worn smooth by repetition. Imagine a servant in the corner saying nothing aloud, but crossing himself under the blanket. Imagine a young apprentice trying not to think of the stories told after sunset, and listening instead to the ordinary sounds of the house. Prayer made the night speakable. It gave shape to the transition from labor to helplessness. It reminded the sleeper that they were not simply falling into darkness, but entering a familiar passage watched by God, saints, household, and habit. There were also moral concerns around sleep. Too much sleep could be criticized as laziness. Beds could be associated with sexuality, illness, idleness, or temptation depending on context. Monastic schedules disciplined sleep through prayer hours. Medical writers advised on sleep positions, timing, digestion, and the balance of humors. Ordinary people may not have followed learned advice closely, but ideas about proper and improper rest circulated through sermons, custom, and household expectation. For most, though, bedtime was less a theory than a sequence. Finish work. Secure the house. Bank the fire. Say the prayer. Lie down. Hope the night passes quietly. And when the room has darkened, the prayer remains in the air for a little while, like the last warmth of a candle after it has been put out. Chapter 7. Inns, travelers, servants, and other uneasy beds. Not everyone slept at home. Medieval Europe was full of movement: pilgrims, merchants, messengers, soldiers, students, laborers, clergy, sailors, beggars, officials, craftsmen, and people going from one village to another because life required it. Travel was slower than ours, and a bed away from home was often uncertain. The in-bed has a long history of complaint. Travelers might share rooms, beds, blankets, fleas, stories, suspicion, and noise. A person used to their own household sounds might find an inn unsettling precisely because its noises were unfamiliar. Who is moving in the yard? Who is whispering near the door? Is that another guest, the host, a servant, an animal, or someone who should not be there? Inns varied greatly. Some were well kept. Some were rough. Some offered food, drink, stabling, and a place near the fire more than privacy. A traveler might sleep on a bed, a bench, straw, or floor space. Wealth, status, gender, reputation, and local customs shaped arrangements. Sharing a bed with a stranger could be ordinary enough in some lodging contexts, but ordinary does not mean comfortable. The traveler's sleep was lighter. Possessions mattered. A purse, a pack, a cloak, papers, tools, or trade goods had to be kept safe. A person might sleep with valuables close to the body. Boots might not be placed too far away. A cloak might serve as blanket and protection. The door might not be under the sleeper's control. A late arrival could disturb everyone. Pilgrims sometimes slept in hospices, religious houses, barns, or informal lodgings. Hospitality was a Christian ideal, but practice depended on resources. A weary pilgrim might be deeply grateful for a place out of rain, even if the bed was hard and crowded. Servants also often slept in uneasy beds. In a household, a servant's sleeping place might be chosen for convenience rather than comfort. Near the kitchen. Near the animals. Near the door. In a loft. In a shared room. On a truckle bed pulled out from under another bed in later arrangements. A servant might be expected to rise quickly if called. Sleep was rest, but not full separation from duty. Apprentices in towns could sleep in the master's house, perhaps near the shop or workshop. Their place in the household was both domestic and economic. They were being trained, disciplined, fed, watched, and used for labor. Their sleep belonged partly to the work structure. For the poor without secure housing, sleep could be precarious. Barns, porches, churchyards, sheds, common rooms, and charitable beds might become temporary shelter. Weather and law both mattered. A person with no stable sleeping place faced not only discomfort, but vulnerability. Even within the home, some beds were uneasy. Illness could turn a bed into a place of watching rather than sleep. Childbirth could gather women around a bed. Death could happen in the same place where ordinary rest had happened for years. A sick person's breathing might keep the household awake. A feverish child might change the rhythm of the night entirely. The medieval bed was therefore not always peaceful. It could be a place of negotiation, rank, duty, risk, and care. But our sleepy history should not forget the ordinary kindnesses that could exist there too. A host placing a traveler near the fire. A servant given an extra blanket in hard weather. An apprentice sharing a joke in whispers after the master sleeps. A pilgrim waking to the smell of bread. A sick person comforted by someone sitting through the night. People made rest where they could. In the inn, the traveler lies down with one hand near the pack. The mattress is not familiar. The blanket smells of other people. Someone snores. Someone mutters in a dream. A horse shifts outside. The traveler listens longer than they wish, then sleep takes them in pieces. In the servant's corner, the sleeper hears the household differently. Not as owner, perhaps, but as one who must respond. If the mistress calls, if the baby cries, if the fire needs attention, if an animal breaks loose, rest may end. Still, the body sleeps when it can. In a barn during harvest, workers lie exhausted in straw. The smell is strong, dry, almost sweet. Muscles ache. Conversation fades quickly. Above them, the roof holds the day's heat for a while, then releases it into the night. These are not the grand beds of illuminated manuscripts. They are the beds of movement, service, necessity, and fatigue. And they remind us that sleep is never only biological. It is social. It asks, who owns the room, who controls the door, who may wake whom, who has enough blanket, who is safe, and who must be ready before dawn. Chapter 8. Morning, bells, and leaving the bed. Medieval mornings often began before comfort was complete. The body might have wanted more sleep, but animals, bells, light, weather, employers, fields, customers, children, and hunger did not always negotiate. Dawn was not a gentle aesthetic event for everyone. It was a command. In towns, bells could structure the day. Church bells called people to prayer, marked hours, warned, celebrated, or mourned depending on context. In villages, bells mattered too, but so did animal routines and agricultural necessity. A rooster might announce badly, early, repeatedly, and without apology. Cows needed milking. Fires needed rebuilding. Water needed fetching. Bread needed making or buying. Tools had to be found. Doors opened. Leaving the bed in winter could be the hardest part of the night. Under the blanket, the body has finally made warmth. Outside it, the room is cold. The first hand into the air learns the truth. The sleeper hesitates. Then duty wins. Someone rises quietly, trying not to disturb a child. Someone else rises noisily because they never learned another way. Straw shifts. A bench scrapes. The fire is uncovered, coaxed, fed. Smoke returns. Light grows by flame before it grows by sun. Morning also reveals the bed. At night, discomfort is hidden by darkness. In the morning, bedding must be dealt with. Blankets are folded or thrown back. Straw is shaken. A mattress may be aired when possible. In better organized households, linens may be kept, washed periodically, and protected. In poorer ones, maintenance is more limited, but no less desired. People in the past did not enjoy dirt simply because they lived with more of it. They had standards, frustrations, and routines within their means. The shared sleeping space becomes a working room again. Pallets are moved. A bench returns to use. A curtain is tied back. Children are dressed. Servants begin tasks. The bed, if fixed, remains as furniture; if temporary, it disappears into the household economy. The room that held bodies now holds labor. This daily transformation is important. For many ordinary people, home was not divided into specialized zones the way modern homes often are. The same space could be kitchen, workshop, dining room, bedroom, storage room, nursery, and sick room. Sleep had to fold itself away so life could continue. The person waking from first and second sleep, from broken sleep, from crowded sleep, from cold sleep, or from a surprisingly good night, did not have long to analyze the experience. They moved into the day. Perhaps they remembered a dream. Perhaps they complained of fleas. Perhaps they thanked God for the morning. Perhaps they worried because a child had coughed through the night. Perhaps they said nothing at all and reached for work. Morning light changed the same objects that had seemed mysterious in darkness. The chest is only a chest. The doorway is only a doorway. The cloak used as a blanket is a cloak again. The animals are hungry. The lane outside is wet or dusty or frozen or bright. Neighbors appear. Smoke rises from other roofs. The household that slept together wakes into its hierarchy again. Who rises first? Often the person with the earliest tasks, not necessarily the person with the highest status. Servants, women responsible for household labor, farm workers, apprentices, and children all had different morning demands. Gender, age, season, occupation, and wealth shaped the order of rising. A wealthy person might remain in bed longer, an ordinary laborer usually could not. Breakfast, if taken, varied by period, region, status, and work demands. Some might eat early, some might work first, some might take bread, ale, porridge, cheese, or leftovers depending on place and means. But before food, there was often fire, water, animals, and the simple restoration of the household from night mode to day mode. The bed loses its spell quickly in the morning. At night, it was shelter. In the first cold minute after waking, it is temptation. Then it becomes an object to be managed. By full daylight, the drama of the night has faded. The fears that seemed large at midnight shrink. The discomforts become jokes or complaints. The good sleep becomes invisible because good sleep often leaves no story. And that is why ordinary sleep is so easy to miss in history. It happened, it ended, and people got up. Again and again. For centuries. Closing. The old wish for an uneventful night. If we step back from this medieval room, gently, without waking anyone, what do we see? Not one single way of sleeping, but many. A straw pallet in a cottage. A shared bed above a shop. A servant's place near the kitchen. A traveler's uneasy rest at an inn. A child tucked close for warmth. A winter bed surrounded by cloth. A summer night with the shutter open. A prayer murmured in the dark. A waking hour between sleeps. A morning bell that arrives too soon. Ordinary medieval sleep was shaped by things both simple and enormous: weather, fuel, household wealth, religion, labor, architecture, animals, insects, social rank, and the length of daylight. It was less private than much modern sleep. It was often more crowded. It could be colder, smokier, itchier, and more interrupted. It depended on bedding that had to be made, maintained, shared, and valued. It belonged to a world where darkness had weight, where light cost fuel, where the household was a small economy of bodies, tools, food, warmth, duty, and care. But it was also recognizably human. The sigh when the body finally lies down. The irritation of a blanket pulled away. The comfort of another person nearby. The worry that wakes you at an unreasonable hour. The small gratitude of warmth. The reluctance to rise. Across the distance of centuries, these things remain close. The medieval sleeper did not need our exact mattress, our electric lamp, or our separate bedroom to know the feeling of surrendering to the night. They knew tiredness. They knew routine. They knew the strange thoughts that come in darkness. They knew the sweetness of a safe bed, however plain, when the weather was hard and the day had been long. So tonight, as our imagined household settles, we can leave them there. The fire is low but watched. The door is barred. The straw has stopped shifting. A child has finally stilled. The animals are quiet enough. Somewhere beyond the wall, the lane lies dark. Somewhere beyond the lane, the fields, roofs, towers, and roads of medieval Europe rest beneath the same night. There may be a waking later. There may be a prayer. There may be a cough, a dream, a bell, a rooster, a cold hand searching for the blanket. But for now, there is only the slow household breathing of people who have done enough for one day. And perhaps that is the kindest ending any ordinary night can offer. Not drama. Not legend. Just enough warmth. Just enough safety. And sleep.